This week on the 77% Street Debate.
I'll never be sad about being colonized by the British. Of all the colonizers, had we been colonized like by the Belgians, they didn't give a damn.
I'm about to give up. When I hear people talk about they don't have a problem with having been colonized, I question how deep are you in this neo-colonial struggle that you've actually embraced your abuser and made her feel that she was right for doing what they did to you.
The 77% is in Nairobi, the capital of Kenya, and it is in this city that nearly 57 years ago, the Kenyan flag went up. We were declared independent. But how independent is Kenya and indeed the rest of Africa? This is the question that we're asking today on our subject, neocolonialism. Why is it still a thing in Africa and who is to blame? But before we go too far, let's come to Nanjala, who is a political analyst and a writer here in Kenya. How would you describe neocolonialism? What does it mean to you?
I think that Kwame Nkrumah gave us the best definition for neocolonialism, which is late-stage imperialism. Because when we had direct imperialism, what you had is foreign countries having direct control, influence over people's economy, people's labor, people's freedom of speech, freedom of association. But with neocolonialism, what you have is indirect influence of political decision-making, of economic decision-making. That's how he defines neocolonialism. It's the benchmark for how we understand what's happening in a lot of the world that was sort of coming out of the colonial process.
Okay, I have a question for the audience. I just want to rope you in really early on, and I think it's important that we address this. We are Deutsche Welle. This is Germany's international broadcaster, and I'm here as an African. Am I a function and a tool of neocolonialism?
Just because you moved from, let's say, an African station to like a wider broadcaster does not make you a tool for neocolonialism, only in the sense that your talent is letting you tell, like right now, a black story within a predominantly, assume, white dosh world. So that does not make you a tool. One becomes a tool when there are direct interest of a neocolonizer.
Okay, so let me come to the farmer right here, Mr. Michael Kibinge. Because your farm, as you mentioned, is over 100 years old, certainly older than the nation of Kenya. Do you feel like you're beholden to the person who began this farm?
Absolutely not, Edith. There's a famous Kenyan author, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who wrote a book, Decolonizing the Mind.
Yes.
And I believe we need to both decolonize our minds and our hearts as Kenyans. 56 years plus after independence, we really shouldn't be complaining too much about neocolonialism. Within the context of the coffee subsector, 4 years ago, we started what is called coffee tourism. So we invite tourists to come and see how coffee is grown, how it's processed, and then they get an opportunity to taste our brands. And that allows us to charge a fee for the tourism component and sell our coffee on farm.
Okay. Let me come back to Nanjala, because I want to challenge you basically based on what Michael has said, that it's been about 56 years. We shouldn't be talking about neocolonization right now. Look at me and Fairview Farm. We're doing it on our own.
When we're talking about colonization and we're talking about imperialism, we're not talking about individual experiences. We're talking about a systemic issue. Yes, you're able to grow your coffee and you run your coffee tours, but is the price, for example, that you're selling your coffee at reflective of the labor that has gone into producing that coffee? Or is it reflective of political priorities that have been set elsewhere? Is it somewhere else saying that because you're an African country, your role is to produce, and especially to produce raw materials? And those are all questions of power and power disparities. And power and power disparities, exploitation of power disparities for the profit of certain regions or certain parts of the world is the very definition of neocolonialism.
Okay, I'd like to come to Schaefer, because I just want to, piggyback on what Nanjala is saying, that it is a system and it is exploitative. But where are our politicians, the people who should be at those international tables making better deals for us, saying this doesn't work for us anymore?
Kenya struggles with the cancer of political leadership that is dysfunctional, that is exploitative, that it's violent, that's discriminatory. There's also this culture that stems from a neo-colonial space of leadership that excludes people from their leaders, which is putting the people into this vicious circle of constantly saying, we need better, but nothing ever changes because the bubble and the shield of neocolonialism is so thick.
So we're saying that, oh my goodness, that that neocolonialism, one second, is seeping into basically every single factor of our lives, politically, economically, even how we think, yeah, socially. And Mordecai Ogada, I really want to know what your take is on that. So as a conservationist, you have a very unique idea, which is that even narratives around Africa have been hijacked by Westerners. Can you talk to me about this?
The neo-colony or the new colony is not necessarily a physical space. It's a mental space. And we are so deep in it that even our top government structures cannot sort of fathom how deep we are in it. That's why we have a Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife, because conservation is a principle and tourism is a business. Conservation of wildlife is about our heritage. It's not about tourism. But this shows where it grew from. We still have the feeling that wildlife tourism is something we do for white people.
So do you think that this is because we have internalized neocolonialism so much that we have become perpetrators of neocolonialism?
Precisely.
It seems you're not the only one. There's somebody here. In fact, there's someone clapping. But you're saying, yeah, we are responsible for the neocolonialism that we are experiencing.
Whenever I'm having a conversation about neocolonialism, I want to start with decolonize thy mind, because it's all in the mind. I'm an LGBTQ person. And most of the time when I sit and look at the history of LGBTQ people, when our colonialists came into our country, they came with the laws and the constitution, which until today is still guiding us. But before that, we had our ways in which we did things. But you see, all these things are things that we were taught and then we internalized. And we started saying now, because this law came and it told us this, these are our new realities. But are they our realities? I'm not a Western person. I was born in Kenya, raised in Kenya. My realities are all from Kenya as a Kenyan child, as a child of this soil. But every other time, I have had to unlearn a lot of things to even accept my truth as a queer person.
So we'll get to the realpolitik around that in just a second. But I want to introduce Mutua Madheka now, because as a photographer, you've gone around the continent of Africa with your very fantastic project, if I may say, Unscrambling Africa. You know, when you hear it said here that it's just as simple as decolonizing the mind, but I'm just wondering how important are perceptions, how important is who controls the narrative, and is that shifting?
So one of the most important things I think is that African artists, photographers, whatever they are, need to look more inside than outward while looking for inspiration for their work. Because most of the time you'll find that when we are guided by things like grants and fellowships, you'll find that anytime you look, somebody, probably someone white, somewhere deciding I want to give grants to African photographers to look at a certain topic, but a topic that I am interested in, not something that they're interested in. Earlier you did mention about this being on DW, and the idea that journalism and news and all that we were taught by the West. That means all our journalistic photography seeks to look like the journalistic photography. That means pictures by a Kenyan photographer will look like pictures by a DW photographer. Why? It's unnecessary. They are not the same people. They are not working in the same context. So I think the stories should be different.
Okay. Nanjala, I just want to come to you so that you can contextualize this for us. Why is this so important? Why is it important that artists, journalists who are within the continent of Africa are self-actualized, that they don't use the West as a model?
You know, we talk about consciousness. It's about the consciousness with which we move through the world. Are we moving through the world confidently assured of our place, our value, and our contribution to society? Or are we moving through the world with a consciousness that is somehow crippled, that we think that we are less than, and so we have to spend the rest of our lives trying to reassert our humanity?
Okay. And I'm just wondering from Tony, is this possible on a political sphere? I think we all heard the former AU ambassador to the US being very, very angry about the fact that some French countries still operate under a CFA. In what ways does neocolonialism still have an impact in the way we are governed?
I'll mention the French very briefly. The French have never mentally left Africa, ever. You can see what goes on with the Congolese. Like, the highest glory of African evolution is to become a Frenchman or a mademoiselle. The French have never lost that mentality. But
one might argue that Kenyans have not lost that mentality. We are, after all, having this conversation in English.
No, but Kenya is a very different country. We may be confused there, but I want to address immediately our political leadership. All neocolonialism relies on somebody having the leader in their pocket. Look at the begging bowls we always have whenever Xi Jinping in Beijing calls.
In that case, is your gripe then with your own government or with the colonial government that created structures in which we are governed as we are?
That is very lazy. We're always trying to blame the British in 2020. We are always trying. All the time we keep complaining about all white people, by which we mean European people. The truth is this. Right now in 2020, Edith, 2020 February 20, the neocolonizer is China.
All right, I'd like to get some more views on this side.
The problem came with the philosophical foundations of this country. Like, if we're talking about export, we didn't center Kenyans or the people who live in this land we are in. So what we're experiencing now is a result of what happened then. So the West is still to blame, but we reproduce what they did. They're to blame, but we are reproducing it. We internalized it. So we shouldn't really center them whenever we think about development. We shouldn't think about this being a tourist destination. We should be thinking about how we're going to eat, how we're going to make this country better.
That's a really good point. Any other person who wants to add on that?
Okay, I think the way Africans have always grown up, we always think that our problems can only be solved by the whites. Like, we have been blinded. Let's try to solve our problems on our own, because the whites, they want to make you feel that they are the people who can solve your problems.
Okay, but is it fair, let me ask Schaefer here, is it fair to sort of lump the whole Western world into, they're the white saviors, they're trying to come and save us, we don't need their help? Is there a room for collaboration, or is it just going to be this bipolar dialogue?
Well, I think room for collaboration that existed or that have been assumed to exist has existed in their white terms. So even as we collaborate, we are collaborating within their own structures, within their own agreements, within their own engagements, within their own requirements, right? White people have always wanted to enforce and to carry forward their whiteness and their supremacy. We should be able to enforce and carry forward our blackness, our black supremacy. But it's never going to happen because we don't have the leadership that is capable to reimagine our own governance and engagements out of the frame that is not neocolonial.
Angela, but is it necessary to always have this white resentment? There's a game we are playing here, and sometimes I get tired of it. They say, I want to take white grants, that I want something specific to us. Your government never. I've won a lot of these scholarships and so on. They're always white. But you tell your own story in your own way. I feel like, what's this white resentment? I'll never be sad about being colonized by the British, of all the colonizers, because history and, we had this.
Please contextualize that.
I will never be sad, because that's the way, real politic of the way of history. Had we been colonized like by the Belgians, they didn't give a damn. But I'm not going to go and keep repenting about 1889. So do you understand my point?
Yes. And I'd like to give, let me come to Schaefer, because she's so exhausted. Her hands are on her head.
I'm about to give up. Because the thing is this, right? So the context is, when I hear people talk about they don't have a problem with having been colonized, I question, how deep are you in this neo-colonial struggle that you've actually embraced your abuser and made her feel that she was right for doing what they did to you?
Tony is saying that the facts can't be changed, that the world order at the time was as it was.
The world order was white people stealing from black Africans. That was the world order. I think sometimes we speak very carelessly and very casually about very fundamental things that have got us in the mess that we are, and I really don't appreciate it.
Okay, Tony, do you agree with the charge that you are so deeply neo-colonized yourself that you don't see why your utterances could have been?
That is absolute bollocks. Yeah? Let me use British language. So people say I'm more neo-colonized. That is bollocks. Because we are educated in this way. Yeah? It's like those people who fail in life and keep talking about how their father was an alcoholic or their mother never loved them enough. And we like that. We must lose the victim mentality about the British especially, which we have in this country.
We started with a very critical question. Neocolonialism, why is it still in Africa? Well, the answer is in our history. And who is to blame for it? Apparently, we all are. Thank you for watching.